Hello and welcome to the first edition of the Tuesday Talks podcast. And before I start the video, I just want to say a big thank you to all the people that have liked, shared and commented on my channel so far. It means a lot to me that, I've really got a basis of people that are interacting with my stuff, because when I started the channel last week, I didn't really know what kind of interactions I was going to get with it. So a massive thank you to everybody for that. And I've been interacting with quite a few people, trying to get them on the Tuesday Talks podcast. And so far, so good, really. I think we've got about 4 or 5 guests lined up for the next few weeks. So I'm really excited to be able to bring you them Tuesday Talks. And the first edition of Tuesday Talks is a good one because we have Leon Taylor on the channel, someone that commentates now for the BBC and the Olympics coverage, has done so since 2008, and a former diver himself as well, winning a silver medal in Athens in 2004 in the diving. So absolutely fantastic and delighted to have him on the channel. Me and Leon speak about a variety of different subjects, starting with how important is it for a sports journalist to know every sport. And this is a topic that I am conducting a story for Journo Resources, and I'm really excited to bring it to you guys once it's out next month. I've conducted a few interviews for it and so far so good, and going back and forth with drafts at the moment, so that should be available next month for you guys to read. And I think it's a really insightful piece, and if you guys could fill out the questionnaire in the comment section below, which is targeted towards people in the sports media, about how many different sports they follow, what they would and wouldn't be comfortable in covering, just so it helps really for me to collect some data for this story. So if you guys could fill that out in the comment section below, that would be amazing. But it's not just that me and Leon spoke about. We spoke about, his history, having been a diver in 2004, winning an Olympic medal, what that feeling was like, as well as mentoring Tom Daley, someone that's just now stepped away from diving but had a fantastic career with 5 medals. And also now Leon is doing TED Talks and the impact that he's having his son Ziggy when it comes to teaching him different sports. So it's a really insightful conversation, and I really hope you guys enjoy it. I will also leave a link in the comment section for the audio version of this podcast if you'd rather listen to it on Spotify, and the link for that will be in the comment section as well as here on the screen. So yeah, if you want to listen to the audio version instead, then completely feel free to. I'm really excited to bring you guys this podcast, so if you enjoy it, feel free to leave a like, a comment about what part you enjoyed, and here is my first Tuesday Talks podcast with the amazing Leon Taylor. Thank you so much for talking to me, Leon. The first question I'll start with is the question that I asked you to start with. How important is it for a sports journalist to know about every sport?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? So it's almost like asking an athlete, do they need to know about every sport that they're going to be involved in? And of course they don't. However, from a sports journalism point of view, understanding the nuances of different sports can actually make one's coverage of a particular sport even better. So I think that there's a blend, right? So if you're going to be covering sports in detail, then I feel that there should be time well spent bringing oneself up to speed on the sport, the people involved in the sport, the history and such like. And if you're just specializing in one coverage of one sport, like myself, for example, obviously my specialism is a sport I competed in. I don't feel I need to be up to date on hockey, even though I love watching hockey and supporting from a fan point of view. I'm not, turning up and using my skill set as a broadcaster and or pundit on that particular sport. So for me, of course, it's not as important to be up to speed. Whereas if a sports journalist is covering a myriad of sports, then I feel that there's an opportunity for one to do their best to continue to stay connected within the parameters of the time that they have. Because there's lots of sports out there, isn't there? So if you say every sport, then I don't know, you wouldn't be able to cover them all, would you? So it's about being precise and spending time where it's going to pay dividends and the highest value in return.
Yeah, and as you said, there's a lot of different sports out there. And I think one of the things that showcases this best is the Olympics and Paralympics. And this was what sort of gave my inspiration to do this story within the summer, where I found myself just watching so many different sports and being so into it because of, how exciting it all is. And when it comes to diving, obviously the dynamic between you and Catherine Downs, where she kind of calls one side of it and you call the other side of it. How does that work between you two?
Yeah, so that's a really good example of the requirement of a commentator. So Kat is a wonderful journalist and broadcaster herself, but she's never dived. So there's a very clear role within each of our requirements within the pair in the commentary box. So I'm the expert. So my role is to talk about all things specific around the performance of a dive or divers and the technical complexities. And Kat's role is to set the scene, to welcome the audience to the venue, to let them know what's going to be going on, to draw out from me, the quote unquote expert, exactly what's going on. And her role is to interpret something that might be a little bit technical. So for example, Kat will often throw to me and say, so Leon, how does the judging work? And it's my role to do my best as an expert to bring that to life. And then Kat would then summarize or ask me a specific question around more clarity on how that would relate to the layperson, because of course in any sport you can get bogged down in the on the technical side, particularly in a complicated sport like diving. So we have very clear roles in the box, and the relationship between us and the way we pass it back and forth and how that breaks it up for the audience is really powerful. Because if I could do it all, I could say, oh, welcome to the pool. It was built then. There's this many people here. Look at the spectators. We've got this coming up. But then, of course, it's just my voice. And then that's very difficult to colour the pictures in such a powerful way when you're doing the back and forth. So it's almost like a dance, right, between us. But within that, we have very clear roles and responsibilities. And of course, Kat can have an opinion on a dive and ask for clarity from my point of view, and I can say what the atmosphere is like. So there we're allowed to blend, but there are very clear roles, which makes it allows us to perform in the box, in the commentary box, at our very best, which is what we want and what the audience want.
It is the biggest dive for Tom Daley and Noah Williams. 3.7 degree of difficulty, 4.5 somersaults in tuck.
Everything demands perfection. Up they come. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes! Yes! It's brilliant from Daley and Williams. I'm so delighted. I am so delighted. That confirms the medal.
It's funny as well, like when we watch the Olympics and we watch the dives, and a lot of us watching don't really know the requirements of a good and a bad dive. And then once the divers hit the pool, we're kind of waiting on your word to see whether it's good or not. So how do you do your best
and also,
to
Sam, what you're waiting on is to stick. Yeah, and another thing is you're waiting. And of course, I give my comment as soon as the divers hit the water. And then, of course, we get the replay. So the judges don't get the replay in diving, but you all do as the audience. So I have to then, in a split second, say, that was X, Y, and Z. And then we all get to watch the replay, and I get to sit there and go, oh, was I right? Luckily for me, most of the time I'm reasonably accurate. So, and that helps having, I don't know, nearly 40 years plus of doing, observing, watching, and being around the sport, because it happens very quickly, as you'll know, as a spectator and as a fan.
Yeah, exactly. And I suppose another element to you being an expert in the field is also getting to know the athletes that are involved currently. So when you're commentating, say, for instance, on the Paris Olympics, and you're watching Tom Daley's farewell, knowing that you've mentored him, what kind of element does that add to it? The fact that you actually know him on a personal level as well?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that's got more challenging for me over the years, if I'm honest, Sam, is because when I first started my commentary adventure, I was still an athlete. So I was still competing and, testing the water, if you will, to use a pun, when it comes to like, oh, do I want to do the commentary? Is it something that I've got the skill set for? So that was way back in like 2006, 2007. And I retired from competing just before Beijing. And those were the Olympic Games where Tom was there as a 14-year-old and I was in the commentary box for the first time for the BBC. So for me then, I knew all the athletes personally, because only a few months before I was standing next to them at the World Diving Cup in Beijing in China, which is of course where those Olympic Games were held. And then every few years it gets harder and harder to know the athletes as intimately, because of course I'm much further removed now. So the Tom example is probably the most powerful one, because I've known him since he was 10 and now he's an old man in the world of diving and retired at 30. And of course I've had to work hard to maintain connection with the athletes. That's really important for me, to attend the national championships, to have the conversations, to speak to the coaches who I know really well in the sport, to get the inside track and to find out a little bit more when it comes to the depth of their character, what else they do, what they're into, what clubs they've trained at before, to add to the richness. So that does require some extra time, whereas I know my tucks from my pikes, from my 3.5 somersaults to my 4.5 somersaults. I don't need to revise that, as it were, but I do need to spend plenty of time, as Kat does, researching the athletes, not just from GB, but from the entire world.
And another element to it as well is emotion. And I think in all sports commentaries, people look for that emotion, don't they? Whether it be the sadness or the happiness or everything in between. And some of your moments that you've had in the commentary booth, like whether it be 2020, you know, one of the highlights for me of that Olympics is when Tom Daley and Matty Lee won gold, and your commentary on it, where you just barely could speak, could you?
No, that's right. And I think, I mean, every commentator has their own style, and I think the one that I'm famed for is my ability to be a fan with a microphone, but also to be able to disseminate the technical elements of it and switch between the two. So the moment that you're reflecting on there, Sam, is where, you know, the technical side of, you know, what was it specifically that went well? What will the judges be looking at? Why are the marks going to be allocated in this way, and how that's going to then impact the leaderboard and the results? And so I've got to be able to switch it in the click of a fingers in order to do both. Because I feel if it was just technical, it would be boring and you would lose the audience. And if it was just the excitement, then people would be going, oh, well, hang on, I don't really know what's going on. So being able to provide both is incredibly challenging, but something I'm very proud of that I've been able to build in my style. Because for me, the most exciting thing is being there and watching the action unfold live, because it is pure drama. It's not written, it's not scripted. It is what's happening, and being able to bring that to colour those pictures is a real honour for me. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else than live in the venue.
That's the beauty of sport, isn't it? That it's just so unpredictable and just a completely different script, isn't it? And when it comes down to diving, have you seen more people take it up or take an interest in it after the Olympics? Because one of the things I've heard from different commentators and people working at the Olympics is the knock-on effect of when people watch it, they then all of a sudden want to play it or take part in it.
Yeah, I know. Certainly, I've seen the interest increase over the time that I've been in the commentary box. Certainly, that's been affected by Tom. You know, as soon as Tom Daley was in the spotlight, there became this amazing interest in diving. In fact, I was reflecting the other day, I just sat down with a documentary making team, and I had a 3-hour interview, and we're doing a documentary on Tom's life so far. And we were reflecting on, you know, his shot to the public eye, how he kind of like skyrocketed into the limelight because of his achievements and how amazing he was in front of the camera. And then in 2012 and 2013, we had a Saturday night TV show called Splash, where celebrities were learning to dance. So you could just see the effect that Tom has had, and of course, you know, has had on the sport. And the same thing happens in kind of other cycles with regard to this Commonwealth Games, the Europeans, the World. As soon as diving's on the TV, there's definitely more interest. Certainly from a younger person's point of view, and even, you know, brave adults as well. Diving's an incredibly dangerous sport, and it's not for everyone because you're risking not quite life and limb, but it's a dangerous sport, and you hurt yourself when it goes wrong. So it isn't quite as safe as other as a movement or exercise or sports would be. But certainly, I always see an interest. And there's the thing that's hard for me, Sam, is there's an appetite to watch it more. And it frustrates the hell out of me that it's not on the TV more, because so many people get into it, as you did over the Olympic Games in Paris, and you're getting your eye in, you're thinking you know what I'm going to say, or whether that's a good dive or a bad dive, and then you don't see it for a long period of time, and you're kind of like, oh, isn't that a shame? And I really do think that's a shame. So I don't know what we do about that. I mean, it's on to you as the next wave of sports journalists to start to drive that interest from a journalistic point of view to get it, covered even more, and give the athletes chance to shine in the spotlight, because they don't go away and hibernate for 4 years. They're training day in, day out. There's so many competitions that could be covered, and I'd be delighted to see that happen.
Does that stem into like a wider conversation of accessibility when it comes to watching these sports? Because obviously the Olympics being on BBC, and then you get a lot of different competitions in between. I mean, even this year at the Olympics, there was a lot of coverage that was on, paid subscription services. So does that sort of work its way into a wider conversation of the more people watch sports on free-to-air TV, the more likely people are to take it up?
Yeah, I think there's all contributing factors, isn't there? If you're not exposed to it in any way, then you don't know it exists, and so how are you going to take it up? And of course, diving has challenges by way of sport, because you're very facilities dependent. So I don't know, football, the most popular sport. I'm looking out into my garden. I've got a 4-year-old son. I can go and kick a ball with him whenever I like. But if I want to take him to jump off a diving board, where I'm currently living, there isn't any around. So it's a very a different landscape when it comes to getting in. But I think that, the landscape of broadcasting and rights holding and cost is how it is. But I even feel there could be and should be more of an effort to share the lesser sports, minority sports, or sports that are covered less often, a bit more. Let's do it, because there's certainly an appetite for it. Certainly from what I've noticed and the conversations I've been having. So I really hope that things can start to improve for a number of sports.
Yeah, and hopefully for diving as well, where, as you said, you had that peak of interest, even like ITV show Splash, as you mentioned already. And I think that really showcased, didn't it, how hard it is to actually dive and the synchronicity behind it. Because I remember growing up watching some of them dives and seeing some people go off like the 10-meter platform and just completely belly flopping.
Yeah, no, I know. It certainly brings it home, doesn't it? Like anything, until you've given it a go yourself, you don't really have the appreciation. So another way of demonstrating that is to let untrained people, normal people, quote unquote, give it a go. Yeah, and just show how difficult these are. And even if you were to do something that we're all familiar with, which is running, if you were lined up on the start line in the 100 meters, how far behind we would be staggering. And so it just gives a perspective on how exceptional these high level athletes are, and how difficult and complex many of most sports, if not all sports, are for different reasons. But diving, you're right, is terrifying because you are so high up above the water, and there's nowhere to hide when you're not wearing anything and you're balanced backwards on your tiptoes. So it makes for compelling viewing.
And saying all of that, like the future of diving now that Tom Daley's gone, obviously you said there that you've filmed a 3-hour interview speaking about him and everything, so you're probably exhausted about speaking about it, but I'll just go for sort of one question about the legacy that he's left in terms of other people watching him and his growth and the medals that he's won from then being able to, now maybe even be a mentor himself like you were for him.
Yeah, no, certainly Tom is an incredible human being, and what he has achieved in the diving pool and outside of the pool is inspiring, no less. And I think his legacy on the boards and off the boards is going to continue to be very powerful, and it certainly has from a British diving point of view. So I'm thrilled to have played a part in that journey and still be dear friends now. So I'm looking forward to his next chapters as they unfold.
And what lies ahead for the future yourself? What do you get up to in between Olympics and commentating coverage? Like, what are you up to at the moment? Because I know you were outside of the UK weren't you, this week.
Yeah, so I have, there's lots of things I'm very fortunate to be involved in. I think the thing that I learned from my time in sport is that I love to perform. So I'm a professional speaker, so I get to speak on stages all over the world. And I'm also part of a company, a Confident Club, who deliver speaker training. So something that 20 years ago I started to do for the first time, public speaking, which obviously led into my broadcasting career as well. So I feel very fortunate that I'm able to be on stages, sharing my insights and discoveries to the world of high performance, but also wellness. So I've been teaching yoga for over 15 years. I appear in the meditation app Headspace. So I've got many different avenues that I'm able to explore. So when I do get the chance to do the commentary, I'm very fresh because I don't get to do it very often. So that's why I'm so excited to take the microphone. And my current biggest adventure that I'm on is my son, who's now 4 years old. So he swims. We've been at the BMX track already today before school at 7:30 by his request. So I've got my hands full with my 4-year-old, which is certainly allowing me to relive my younger years again and try all these different activities that he's interested in taking part in.
Yeah, I actually read an interview before speaking to you about, you and Ziggy and trying to get him to like learn how to swim and the BMX and stuff as well. So one day, could you see him competing at the Olympics? Because obviously BMX is now part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think what I will say, Sam, is whatever he wants to do. So, I mean, he's very active. He loves to move, as I did when I was young. And the BMX pump track is only just opened very close to where we live. And so he wants to go there all the time. And that's just great. So for me, it's just facilitating that. And, if that leads one day, I was chatting to a friend of mine, Ross Cullen, who is a 2-time Olympian, who's a reserve in Paris. He was out in Paris. Frustratedly for him, he wasn't able to take to the track. But I filmed Ziggy and he was like, oh, he's doing great. And so, who knows? He's surrounded by, by people who are encouraging him to do what he enjoys. And I think that's the environment I want to create. And if he chooses a sport and wants to go for it, then I'll support him. And if he doesn't, that's also fine. I just want him to do the things that he really enjoys. And I'll let him figure it out for himself. But it's interesting to see him really going for certain things and then being less interested in others. And I'm fascinated to see where he goes.
And finally, to cap things off, speaking about the career you've had, whether it be, diving in 2004, winning the silver medal, going into commentary and then being a dad, throughout all of this stuff, what's the best bit of advice that you've learned, either from someone that you know or read up, just about, how to go about your life, balancing, your working career and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? The best piece of advice, because we get given many, many pieces of advice. I think the one that I'm really keeping myself honest on at the moment, which is one that I didn't do in the past, it would be this notion of savoring. Okay. And I felt that when I was an athlete, I was always kind of like looking to the next thing. Okay, all right, I've done that training session, I've got this next one, and then, this competition, now I'm going to do this. And there was always this kind of urgency to get to the next thing. And as I've matured, and I've always given this advice, make the most of this moment because it will be over and it'll be gone. And when you're talking about your career or a competition, sometimes you're rushing through things to get them done and you're not actually savoring the moment, including the hard things and the boring things. So I think for me, if I'm going to share a piece of advice that's been very powerful for me, it's savoring. And savoring the things that you're finding hard as well, for whatever reason, because there's so much richness and learning in them. And if you do really pay attention to the things that you're struggling with, you actually find your way a little bit more easily. So you don't meet things with such resistance. You can find a bit of freedom and ease, even within the challenging experiences that you may be going through.
I think that's the case for a lot of people listening to this podcast, because I'm starting up this thing, to give people that want to get into sports journalism or different types of media, inspiration to do so from hearing people that are there already. And someone myself that's done like the degrees that I've done and like diploma and, even starting this, it's always the next thing. But I feel like you've got to kind of look back at your journey sometimes and reflect on the things that you've done to get to this point and be proud of it.
Completely agree. Yeah. And actually, when you're doing it, so our conversation is a great example of that, is just kind of letting that be like, oh, wow, that actually happened. And, this is how I felt right now during it, rather than thinking, right, good, that's done now. Right, next on the to-do list, which is how I lived my life for many years. So that point of savoring.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Leon. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. And lastly, because I'm starting up this new podcast, I'm going to ask everybody at the end of each edition, someone that I should try and speak to for the next podcast to, share the stories and also to hear other people's perspectives on things. So if you were to recommend one person for me to try and get in contact with, who would it be?
Oh yeah. Oh, and I'm going to throw people under the bus. It's always a good question, isn't it? So I guess the person that comes to mind, who I was with recently, is Mark Hunter. Mark Hunter is a Olympics gold medalist, Olympic champion from Beijing, Olympic silver medalist from London, rowing in the lightweight rowing, and we have shared passions, around getting people moving and the importance of physical health and how that contributes to your mental health. So Mark and I were together recently, and so to get a different perspective, but from someone who has had that rich experience of elite sport and, of course, at the highest level, I would say Mark Hunter.
So that was the first edition of the Tuesday Talks podcast, and I really enjoyed chatting to Leon there. There's a lot of things that I'm sure people listening can take away from his advice, about savouring the moment specifically. I really enjoyed and appreciated that advice, because I'm sure there are many sports journalists out there that are always looking towards the next thing and not perhaps reflecting on what they've done already. So I think savouring the moment and enjoying the process is really something we can all take on board. Mark Hunter is the next guest that I have approached and is someone that Leon Taylor recommended. So it'd be fantastic if we could get him on the podcast as well. And if you guys want to, recommend anybody that I should speak to, then leave your recommendations in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. The next video out on this channel will be later this week, and it's a new venture that I'm kind of going into, something that I watch a lot of videos regarding but never really made videos of myself. So I'm really excited to be able to bring you that later this week. Thank you so much for listening towards the end. New video coming out later this week. And if you enjoyed this one, feel free to leave a like, comment and subscribe.